Hello and welcome to this virtual Dev Summit presentation of ArcGIS Enterprise and Introduction. My name is Scott McDonald and I'm here with Jill Edstrom. Jill is a product advocate on the ArcGIS Enterprise team and I am a product engineer. This session is going to be intended for both administrators and users of ArcGIS Enterprise currently, as well as those who are looking to evaluate ArcGIS Enterprise, are not quite sure what it means, why you would use it, and those of you who are completely new to the platform. We're going to be talking about ArcGIS Enterprise with four main adjectives throughout this presentation. We're going to be using the words foundational, powerful, flexible, and collaborative. Now, when we talk about ArcGIS Enterprise being foundational, we mean that for organizations who use ArcGIS Enterprise, it is at the center of their organization. The GIS that they use all connects to ArcGIS Enterprise, whether that's in the desktop or on the web. All of the content is centered around your enterprise implementation. It's also powerful, and not just in the sense that you can do advanced things with ArcGIS Enterprise, but also that it is very user-friendly, and that we try to make it as intuitive as possible to collect and manage your data and to make the most of it. ArcGIS Enterprise is flexible in that we present quite a lot of options to you based on what your organization needs. And every ArcGIS Enterprise looks a little different because it is always deployed for unique organizations. And lastly, ArcGIS Enterprise is collaborative. It is all about sharing content over the web easily and efficiently while still maintaining security and the authoritative nature of your data and content. So let's start with very basic overview. What is Web GIS? We talk about ArcGIS Enterprise and also ArcGIS Online as being Web GIS platforms. What we mean when we say that is that users can access the GIS content without necessarily having to be located or working on the same machine as the data and content reside. Instead, you're connecting over either an intranet or internet to a server machine or a multiple server deployment of WebGIS content. This means two things. First of all, when you're not working on the same machine as your data, that means that others can work on it too. You can have multiple people in your organization or around the world using different devices to access the same data, often different permutations or configurations of that same underlying data, without interfering with each other. The second big advantage of WebGIS is that it allows for some really powerful things to happen. You can really make the most of data and analysis by using powerful server machines, often grouped with multiple machines for distributed processing of complex tasks. And that means that you can really drill down and drive some amazing new insights from your data with server machines. To put that a different way, we have the typical desktop model, where you're one person working on a single machine. You're really limited by the processing power and memory of that machine. If I'm running a task that takes 6 hours, I can't really make that faster because that's limited by the RAM of my machine and the data that I have available. You could, of course, have data stores set up with that machine as well, but still you're working on that single machine. In WebGIS, everyone in your organization can access parts of the same back-end server infrastructure through a shared GIS portal. And we'll talk about that in a minute. With that, you're not simply limited by your own machine. Even if you're working on a phone or a tablet, you can still access really advanced work because that processing is being done often by the server side. A common misconception is that WebGIS is a replacement or a step up from desktop GIS, and that's not true. We like to think of it as the central tier in a modern GIS ecosystem. That means that it isn't simply just you're moving from ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap to using the map viewer. Instead, it's the next step in a process. When I finish my work in ArcGIS Desktop or ArcGIS Pro, I'm able to publish that finished work to the WebGIS, such as ArcGIS Enterprise. In ArcMap, I typically publish a service. In ArcGIS Pro, depending on whether I have depending on what my implementation looks like, I'm either sharing web layers or web maps or publishing standalone services. But regardless, I'm taking that finished work and I'm publishing and sharing it to the WebGIS to be then consumed by myself and others who are working on the WebGIS. It looks like this. Typically, we have GIS professionals working in ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Desktop. When they're done with their work, they'll share it to ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online, the WebGIS hubs for their organization. Also connected to those hubs are going to be ArcGIS apps such as Collector, Survey123, and geo-enabled systems such as ArcGIS Indoors, ArcGIS Urban. These different aspects of the Esri geospatial cloud that connect and use specific portions of the data that's sitting in your ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online implementation. Of course, ArcGIS for developers offers quite a lot of different tools and abilities for those of you who have developing skills to customize and extend all aspects across this entire ecosystem. So now let's talk about some capabilities of ArcGIS Enterprise. The first set of capabilities I'd like to talk about that you can do with ArcGIS Enterprise are pretty basic. They're parallel to what you might do on ArcGIS Desktop or ArcGIS Pro. You're able to work with complex data like imagery, 3D data, and raster data. You can use all kinds of data, and we'll talk about that in a bit, of all the different types of data that you can use in ArcGIS Enterprise. But the point is that you're doing all these things in a web browser. As opposed to using ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Desktop on your machine, you're actually doing it in a client side where the server is doing all the powerful work. The next capability category is about going a step further and empowering your organization to do things they wouldn't be able to do by themselves. You can share and collaborate in powerful ways and make it very easy for non-GIS users to access and make the most of GIS content. For those of you who have field workers, you're able to connect your field operations to ArcGIS Enterprise. And there are a number of really cool features that allow you to empower your field workers. And lastly, you're able to build and extend your enterprise with applications. The last set of capability category that I'd like to talk about is about going beyond and solving really tough problems that couldn't be solved just a few years ago. ArcGIS Enterprise is really focused on data science and machine learning, and not just in the sense of empowering those of us who are data scientists and those who have 4-year degrees in complex statistical analysis. Instead, we want to make data science and machine learning tools available to everyone, and to make it easy for you to derive really interesting insights from complex and large data without having to do a ton of legwork. ArcGIS Enterprise also allows you to work with massive data sets. We have tools such as the geoanalytics toolset that allow you to do feature analysis on large, maybe even billions of points within a data set. And for those of you who have real-time event streams, such as from an Internet of Things, we allow you to work with that real-time data and process that in a way that's consumable, a way that you can use in your actual GIS content coming from that massive data stream. So I just talked about some of these capabilities, and there are a lot there. And we want to say that not all organizations will use all of these. Many might use only a few. But the point is that ArcGIS allows you to pick and choose from a wide range of capabilities using that powerful Web GIS model in order to make the most of your data for your organization.
So with all these concepts that Scott's gone over in mind, it's been very conceptual, and you might be wondering, what does a Web GIS look like? You can think of a Web GIS as having 3 components. There's the front-end portal, the back-end server, and the data store, or the data stores depending on your deployment. So your front-end portal is where you share content from your desktop GIS, whether that's ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. It allows you to view and work with that content in the map viewer, which is right within your web browser, whether that's Chrome, Firefox, Safari, anything like that. And you can also bring in GIS items from the web. So you're not necessarily just confined to the data that you're publishing from ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. You can bring in OGC services from a third-party server. Maybe you have some REST service URLs that you want to be able to consume in your web map as well. That's all there for you within the front-end portal. And it's not just for consuming those services. You can also produce outputs as well, creating those web maps, turning those web maps into web applications, running reports, and doing analysis on your data as well. Now, for the back-end server, that's the part that does all the heavy lifting on the back end here. You can run GIS services that power your items. This is where all the resources go into all this analysis and everything that you're doing in your environment. It handles all of those requests, whether that's panning and zooming in a map, finding a specific location, or running an analysis to see, hey, what's the closest location to my house that I can go get gas? You can also scale processes based on traffic. So for example, if you're a college campus and you have students trying to find their buildings on their very first day of school, you may need more resources at the beginning of the term compared to the end of the term when your students are very confident in where they're going and don't need to reference the web map. Lastly, there are the data stores. So this is where the data lives. The server pulls from the data and then it shows up in the portal. And it can be hosted by reference or also hosted by ArcGIS itself. And it really just facilitates that instant data retrieval. So perhaps you could have somebody editing on the desktop and it shows up in the web depending on your configuration. That potential is all there for you. So let's break it down and how it actually looks in ArcGIS Enterprise. The first part we're going to be talking about is the portal itself. This is the content management system for you. Here you can find, use, add, share, analyze, and manage your data. And it's not just about storing that content, it's also about manipulating that data. Maybe you need to create those offline map areas for field workers using Collector for ArcGIS. Instead of taking an entire base map offline, you can limit it to just the area that you're doing your work in, saving yourself how much data needs to be downloaded. You can also create layer views. Maybe you don't need everybody to see the entire data set, but only a specific portion, just within the area they're working. You can also create and customize your own 2D and 3D maps and apps depending on your data. And also use ArcGIS applications, whether that's dashboards or ArcGIS insights. There's a lot you can do here within the portal. Lastly, you have the ability to discover and use living atlas items, which Scott will be going over more later. Within the portal, it's not just using the content, it's also the interface that you can manage all of your users and licenses. Being able to add users, set up the security for that, maybe making sure that they have an ArcGIS Pro license or a license for Collector, anything like that. You can also monitor item usage, create groups, maybe have a subset of folks that you want to share data with. You can categorize your content and even administer collaborations for being able to work with other ArcGIS Enterprise portals and ArcGIS Online. You can even customize the look and the feel of your portal to make sure that it reflects what your business needs are, to have a landing page that lets folks know that this is your organization. You can also do this through sites and pages for those that maybe aren't necessarily interacting with the data but just need to be able to view it and take a quick glance at what's going on. So moving on to that back end there, we have ArcGIS Server. This federates with Portal, so it takes on all of the security within Portal and integrates seamlessly. You also have the ability to view and configure services in ArcGIS Server Manager app. So if you need to make sure that there's more resources available for a service, anything like that, you can do that here. You can also access any of your services through the ArcGIS REST API. So maybe that's when you're going to be pulling that into the web map, you can go directly through REST, perform queries here, any operations as well. Administrators can also monitor and tune and configure their site and security, making sure that it's set up exactly how they need it to be. You have the potential to add custom extensions, whether SOEs, SOIs, and also administer API access, whether that's manually or programmatically. Maybe you want to stop all your services at a single time, you can run a script for that. Here you also have the ability to view logs and everything else with your ArcGIS Server site. Lastly, there is the ArcGIS Data Store. So this is an ArcGIS managed database. That really means it does all the managing for you. You don't need to be a DBA or anything like that. You can still have the ability of having an enterprise geodatabase here. It enables hosted layers, so you can publish content or share it directly from ArcGIS Pro, anything like that, and supports self-service mapping. So beyond just those 4 components of Enterprise itself, you have user-managed data. You have your features that you have. You have tabular data, imagery, real-time, big data, field data. There's quite a bit here. Now just keep in mind, you're not going to necessarily have all of this in your environment, but Enterprise is there for you in case you do. So it's there to host your own data. And going off of that, it's helpful to think of data across the WebGIS platform and having different names depending on where exactly it's hosted. And so for desktop, you can have layers, feature classes, mosaic datasets, address locators, geoprocessing tools, 3D scenes, even more than this. And the data that you're using in desktop informs how it shows up on the server side. What type of service is produced when you share or publish it? You would have the map services, feature services, image services, geocode services, geoprocessing services, and scene services. That's how they're going to show up in the REST API for you or through ArcGIS Server Manager. Now, when that data shows up in the Enterprise portal, they'll be reflected as layers. It'll be JSON referring to that service, and each of these layers is specific to that service type, whether that's the map image layer, feature layer, image layer, a geocoder, web tool, scene layer. And kind of bringing this all together with all our components of ArcGIS Enterprise. You have the Enterprise portal, which is the front end. It ties to that server as the server that's doing the heavy lifting as the middleman, which also references the ArcGIS data store. Also, you can have your own user-managed data. And then from there, you have your ArcGIS web adapter. It's a reverse proxy, one that just sits right in front of the Enterprise portal and ArcGIS server. And folks can access it. So you have your GIS analysts, app builders, app users, viewers, all accessing it for the Enterprise portal. And then you also have your administrators interacting with ArcGIS server, as well as your data managers and developers.
Thanks, Jill. Now we'd like to talk a little bit about how Enterprise gives you power. And we don't just define power here as the ability to do amazing, complex visualizations and maps. We also wanted to define power as the ability for everyone to be able to use those tools. It's about being intuitive and having access and making it easy for everyone to feel confident in the GIS content that they're working with. Now, Jill talked a lot about ArcGIS Server, and we'd like to talk about server roles. This is a focused capability set that is assigned to a server when you license it. Now, the basic unit of an ArcGIS server is a site. A site may be one or more ArcGIS server machines that are running the ArcGIS server software. And when there are multiple machines in a site, they are all participating on equal terms. Any service request that comes into the site will be assigned to one of the machines participating equally. Now, typically, the default server role, when you first launch ArcGIS Server, the server is licensed as a GIS server. Now, this is the basic role that involves mapping, geocoding, geoprocessing. So this is where you're going to host your map and feature services. If you have geocoders, if you're running geoprocessing tools, they will all use the GIS server, the default role. If you have specific capabilities that you want to unlock with ArcGIS Server, you can unlock any of the additional server roles, each of which uses some specialized server technology to provide advanced capabilities. So when you have imagery that you want to use, you can turn to image server. You can either license this as a distributed raster processing server or as an image hosting server. Both are very powerful tools for those of you who use complex, large imagery sets and need to exploit those in advanced ways. Next, we have GeoEvent Server. Now, this is for all about real-time data, when you have event streams coming in, such as from a sensor network or a monitoring station network. GeoEvent Server allows you to intake these event streams in real time and do important GIS work with them. Perhaps you need to filter them, clean them automatically before adding them to your web map. And you do that in the GeoEvent Server Manager. You can output GeoEvent service streams as stream services, which automatically update in the web map, or you can also constantly be adding them to a feature layer. Now, where Image Server is all about raster data, GeoAnalytics Server is all about working with large, potentially massive data sets of vector and tabular data. So if you have all of the taxi drop-offs in New York City over the last month, that's going to be a large amount of data. You can use GeoAnalytics Server to cut through the noise and to produce patterns and trends, to find hotspots. It's all about working in a distributed fashion by distributing the processing workload across multiple server machines in order to make those tasks run much more quickly and to get you your results faster. And lastly, our newest server role is Notebook Server. This is all about data science and GIS administration for those of us who are able to work with Python and to make the most of our automation tools. Notebook Server was launched last year at ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7, and if you were watching the plenary this year, you would have seen notebooks used in some really amazing ways to automate and to really cut through the manual work required to do data science and GIS work, and instead have the notebook, have the GIS Python work do all of that for you. Notebooks combine code, the Python code with ArcPy or the ArcGIS API for Python, with the visualization of that code. So if you have a web map, you're able to view it right in the notebook. If you have a graph or a table, you can view that right in line as well. And you're able to use documentation. You're able to tell users and consumers what you're doing in the notebook as you go, which makes it a really transparent way to work and makes it a very automatable, repeatable workflow. But you don't have to use these server roles in order to have really powerful and useful spatial analysis. Right out of the box with GIS Server, the map viewer in the portal offers 27 standard feature analysis tools. Everything from the ability to find hotspots, to enrich your data. Perhaps you need to just simply manage your data or find buffers. All those things are possible right out of the box with the layers that you bring in to the portal map viewer. You're also able to work with a lot of publicly available data. Esri's Living Atlas of the World is a public data clearinghouse where we curate content and make it available to everyone with a license to use it. The Living Atlas is really powerful. Perhaps you need to just add in current traffic, or you need to add a layer of all US county boundaries, or you need to know all of the trees in Sweden. All of these things are probably possible with the Living Atlas of the World, and you're able to work with them in your portal just as you're able to work with the layers that you bring in and the data that you have in your organization. Now, with all of the data that you're going to be bringing in, you're likely going to have a lot to work through. And the portal makes it easy to make sure that you're not just dumping everything into your portal. It offers efficient content management in a variety of ways. As Jill mentioned, you're able to work with groups in the portal. And we'll talk about groups when we talk about security. Groups are a way for you to organize your users into different groups, where you're then able to provide content to them that only they need to see and cut out the other things that are irrelevant to their workflows. You're also able to categorize the content in your portal based on categories that matter to you. Of course, metadata is very important when you're working with content with other people who may not understand exactly what this item or this layer is for. The portal really emphasizes making the most of your metadata. You can mark content as authoritative if you want to recommend its use, or mark it as deprecated if you'd like to discourage it. You have the ability to set quite a lot of metadata with your item description for every different item in your portal. And the portal reminds users when metadata is still not complete in order to make sure that the item is well documented. When it's time to take your web maps to the next level, you need to have apps. Web apps provide either a broad or narrow focus to the data and the presentation of your completed web layers and web maps. When you build web apps, we give you quite a lot of power to choose what level of involvement you want to have with that web app's creation. Perhaps you just need a very quick, no coding involved, coarser-grained app. You can use our configurable apps and app templates in order to produce a very quick, kind of a broad-focused web app. Perhaps you want to have complete control over the app that you're building. You want to have the ability to do more coding, to have a finer grained app that involves more effort but produces a more customized look. For this, you can use our SDKs and APIs that are available through the ArcGIS for Developers program. Lastly, when you're talking about having great power in your organization, you also have the responsibility, remember Uncle Ben, to keep your data confidential, keep its integrity, and make sure that it is always available to your users. This CIA triad is an important concept in cybersecurity, and we focus on it a lot in ArcGIS Enterprise. When we're talking about confidentiality, ArcGIS Enterprise makes it easy to protect sensitive information from improper access. You're also able to know who has access to what content through the sharing model. When you have authoritative data, ArcGIS Enterprise makes it easy to ensure that you're not going to have improper access and improper alteration of that content, whether it's intentional or not. And availability is all about protecting your system from downtime and data loss in the event of a machine failure. It happens all the time. Maybe your basement gets flooded. Maybe there's a power outage. And the important thing is, what are you going to do when that machine failure occurs? We have a number of tools that allow you to back up and keep your system running, perhaps dependent on your service level agreement that you provided with your customers, or whatever you need for your particular level of access that you need to provide. Now we'd like to talk about how ArcGIS Enterprise is flexible. There are a lot of options available with ArcGIS Enterprise, and Jill's going to go through all of them, and it can be kind of a lot to take in. So the important thing to remember is that not every ArcGIS Enterprise, in fact, no two deployments ever look the same. Every WebGIS is deployed by a unique organization with a unique budget to accomplish unique needs. So deploying ArcGIS Enterprise needs to start with you asking the right questions as an administrator. We like to think about questions such as, who needs access? What kind of work will they be doing? Where will they be getting the data from? How often do they need to be working in the portal? And then from that, you can make a set of decisions. We need this amount of resources. We need to give access to this many people. They need to have this level of control, and we need to be able to prevent them from seeing this or that. We as administrators need to be able to customize our backend. We need to conform with these existing IT practices of our organization, and we need to enforce this level of security.
So with these questions that Scott went over in mind, you can carry out decisions with these options. When thinking about infrastructure type, do you need an on-premise machine, maybe a bare metal machine right on-prem in your organization? Or could you go with virtual machines, whether that be in Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, anything like that? Perhaps you don't necessarily want to be in charge of managing this. You can leverage Esri managed cloud services on your own or your own private cloud. There's really a mix of multiple options here, and it's really all a matter of what is best for you and your organization. You also have to consider the infrastructure size. How many machines do you want to have for ArcGIS Enterprise? Do you want a single machine deployment? Do you want multiple machines to support this WebGIS of yours? And also consider the size of each machine. How many cores will they have? What is the RAM available? This is all something that you can think about. You can also consider server roles and add-ons. So Scott went over this, but there's GeoAnalytics for that big data analysis, GeoEvent for that real-time processing. Do you need stream data up to date to the second? Image server for advanced imagery and raster, notebook server for those data science workflows. And there's more beyond just the server roles. We have Business Analyst Enterprise, ArcGIS Mission, ArcGIS Excalibur. ArcGIS Monitor allows for you to actually get an idea of what exactly is going on within your deployment. There's also Workflow Manager, and also specific industry solutions. Now keep in mind that you're not going to probably have all of these, but if you want any of these, think about it when you're setting up your deployment. Also consider high availability. What is your service level agreement? What's our plan to deal with machine failure? If you have that basement flood, are you okay with what might be happening? You really want to limit downtime and data loss. Consider standby machines and a backup strategy. whether that be using one of our tools, taking a snapshot, and really thinking about with that information, how are you going to implement that backup on your side? And lastly, once you have all that thought about, think about the deployment tools. How are you actually going to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise? You can do it manually, or you can consider the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder for that all-in-one wizard for a single machine deployment. If you're working in the cloud, you might want to use one of the machine images and cloud builders, whether it's through AWS or Microsoft Azure. You also have the option of going script-based and using Chef or PowerShell DSC. There's a lot of options here for you, and it's just a matter of figuring out which one is best. So WebGIS isn't necessarily just ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. It's not just one or the other. Now, while ArcGIS Online is Esri managed cloud infrastructure and ArcGIS Enterprise is traditionally your customer managed infrastructure, there's room for them to work together. So one of the things is in ArcGIS Enterprise, if you're using the default base maps and content services, you're going to be leveraging ArcGIS Online. That data is still hosted and online and being pulled into your enterprise portal. You also have the ability to set up a collaboration between the two. We'll go into that in a moment, but really it allows for the two to communicate back and forth and send data back and forth. Not just enterprise consuming data from online, but also enterprise sending data to online the other way. So planning and adjusting doesn't just stop after you deploy. You don't deploy and you're good to go. Your usage and patterns really mean that you need to be able to have scalability in your infrastructure. When I mentioned those college students trying to access that web app on the first day of classes, maybe you need more resources available then, and then you can cut back later on in the term. Scalability is crucial here. Another thing to consider is also your options for access and authentication. So by default, there is the built-in identity store. Users configured within your portal. They're separate from anything else in your organization. There's just a username and password that lives within your ArcGIS Enterprise environment. You also have the option for Enterprise Identity Store using Active Directory or LDAP. The users are configured externally and then imported. So that allows for you to integrate with your organization's authentication system. There's actually something that's a little bit more of a hybrid, which is actually going to be SAML Identity Provider. So you're still using that IDP, and then you can have those enterprise users, maybe for everybody who's within your organization. But if you need to have some built-in users, perhaps for contractors that aren't directly within your organization, you can still leverage that built-in accounts that are nested right within your ArcGIS Enterprise. As I mentioned, this is all about flexibility and what's available for you.
The last thing we like to talk about is collaboration. When we talk about ArcGIS Enterprise, as I mentioned going back to the beginning, we have that Web GIS model. That's all about sharing, and it's all about making sure that you can work with the people in your organization, whether or not they speak the language of ArcGIS. That means that we have intuitive sharing of GIS content by design. Now to start with, we try to make all content shareable in basically the same way. That makes it easy for you to understand and have a familiar sharing and security model that you can apply across your site, no matter what kind of data you're working with. So what we mean by that is that everything in the portal is an item. Whether you have a web map, a web app, a shape file, a CSV that you've imported, a Microsoft Word document, whatever that is, when it's brought into the portal, it's handled as an item. It's an individual item. And the list on the right is from our documentation, and it describes all the different types of items that you can add into the portal. That means that everything has the same security setting. When you're able to configure security and sharing for that item, just as you would any other item. When you have an item and you're able to share it, what you're able to do is choose between these 4 levels. The most secure level of access, of course, is the not shared option. When you click that lock for your item, only you and administrators are able to view your item. Next, you can choose to share the item with 1 or more groups. Notice that there isn't a single user option. You're not able to share an item just with 1 user. Instead, you would have that user be part of a group. This ensures that no matter how much users move around, groups are always the same and items remain with that group. You can also share an item with your whole organization. Say that rather than just needing 1 set of people in a group to view the item, you need everyone in your organization to have access to your map or your app or whatever it may be. If your portal allows public access, you can, of course, share it with everyone and allow zero authentication to be required before the item is viewed.
Now, sharing content doesn't have to just be limited to your one ArcGIS Enterprise portal. There's also an option of distributed collaboration. This allows for sharing content in a secure, trusted pipeline with familiar access control. And really the idea is that you have multiple enterprise portals communicating to each other, to the organization. You can even have a network of organizations. Each participant keeps their own security settings, and there's an automatic sync schedule. So you can have people in different ArcGIS Enterprise portals accessing the same data and also contributing to it as well, depending on your settings. Now, with keeping that data sync in mind, you also are able to have a common hub of data and information, making one deployment's data usable in the next. And it allows for you to share feature layers, applications, 3D data, flat files, and more. There's a variety of use cases and setups. Perhaps a city has multiple municipalities with different collaborations. Maybe you have the fire department and the police department sharing data with one another. Now, if it's not just about sharing the GIS data and you just want people to be able to access it, you might want to consider an enterprise site, heavily customizable for your organization. It allows for you to deliver curated content for a specific audience. Maybe you have public information about hurricanes. You have information just for fire and emergency services. Maybe something separate for law enforcement. You have the ability to tailor information to discovery to various audiences. Really, who do you want to share it with and how do you want to share it? They don't even need to be a GIS user. They can easily access it through your enterprise portal. Lastly, we want to go over user types, just how you manage your users and licenses in your portal. Instead of just everybody getting the exact same license with all the same access, we really want to consider the person's identity. Are they a field worker? Are they a GIS professional? What do they need to have access to? This comes into looping in the capabilities. Do they just need to view the data? Should they have the ability to edit the data? Maybe analyze it and take it a step further. Or are they an administrator? There's a lot of possibilities here, and really the user type is tailored to what your users need. Lastly, you get to choose what apps they get access to. So are they going to be just viewing data in the enterprise portal, or perhaps they need an ArcGIS Pro license? If they're that field worker, maybe they need Survey 123. There's a lot of different options here, and instead of just giving everybody one blanket license, you really get to customize who gets access to what and making sure it's exactly what your organization needs. So we've gone over quite a bit. And then how do you learn more here? There's just so much. We're well aware of that. So consider looking at our documentation. This is something great that not only goes into what exactly ArcGIS Enterprise is and how to use it, but we also have best practices listed here. Through our ArcGIS blogs, you can stay up to date with the latest information, whether that's what's new in a release or some new functionality you might have missed. You can also interact with us through GeoNet. You can write your questions, help each other out. We're on there too as staff, and then also post your ideas. Let us know what you'd like to see in the software. And with that in mind, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. I wish we could all be in person for this, but I appreciate you tuning in virtually and really appreciate your time. And good luck with your ArcGIS Enterprise.
Thank you.